a semi-sci-fi world, there lived King Grey, the most powerful and bloodthirsty ruler of his time. His reign was built on force and fear, as he cut down anyone who dared oppose him and crushed kingdoms like they were sandcastles. Yet, at the height of his reign, he died suddenly in his mid-30s with no apparent cause. Floating in the abyss, a mysterious voice urged him to seek the light in his next life. Before he could complain, he found himself reborn in an alternate world as the newborn Arthur Leywin, the first son of retired adventurers Reynolds and Alice. Understandably, he was furious at being reduced from feared tyrant to diaper-wearing baby, but his tantrum faded when he discovered that humans here wielded an unfamiliar power called magic. Determined to protect himself by gaining as much power as possible, but there wasn't much in a body that could barely hold its own head up. On the bright side, at least he could finally nap in peace without worrying about assassins sneaking into his room. Months passed and Arthur gained better control of his tiny body. He took every chance to learn, pretending to sleep only to sneak peeks at his parents' books in secret. From them, he discovered that his new home was the continent of Dicathan, a land split into 3 kingdoms: Sapin, the human nation; Darv, the underground kingdom of dwarves; and Elenoir, the forest nation of elves. He also learned that magic users fell into different types: conjurers who enhanced their bodies and emitters who cast spells from afar. The concept was surprisingly similar to the key he once mastered, and naturally he tried to use magic. Unfortunately, his experiments ended with him being caught by his mother and promptly put to sleep, literally. 2 years later, Arthur could now walk on his own. His father, eager to start training him, tried handing him a sword, only to be scolded by his mother. Alice adored her growing son but worried about his unervingly serious nature, as he rarely smiled. One day she took him to the market and noticed how much more animated he became outside the house. For Arthur, these outings were golden opportunities to observe and learn about the world around him. He especially paid attention to magic. He never misses the opportunity to learn about magic and observes his father using magic. Alice insisted her husband was more amazing than he appeared, and Arthur had to agree when he saw Reynolds smash a boulder to dust with a single punch. Later, Alice tucked Arthur into bed, but he cleverly begged for books instead of sleep. At first she refused but eventually caved and his secret studies continued. Having been a master of Ki in his previous life, Arthur practiced magic diligently. He succeeded in casting his first spell, with explosive results. Unfortunately, the success came at the cost of destroying his own house and injuring Reynolds in the process. Reynolds and Alice rushed back to find their toddler floating in the ruins, glowing with magical energy. Before anyone could process that Arthur walked towards them, a chunk of roof debris came crashing down on Arthur. For a moment, he thought his second life would end before it even began. But his parents rushed in and saved him at the last second. Alice burst into tears of relief, clinging to him. Arthur, who had never experienced true family in his first life, was overwhelmed by strange emotions he couldn't name. He felt guilt, warmth, and most confusing of all, love. For the first time in either of his lives, Arthur cried not out of fear but because he finally understood what it meant to have a family. Arthur often recalled moments from his past life, including the time an emissary from another nation attempted to assassinate him. When captured, the man begged for his family's lives. In a twisted gesture of mercy, Arthur executed the family himself, sparing them years of inevitable torture. To his grim surprise, the emissary actually thanked him. Reynolds began teaching Arthur the sword. To his shock, his young son already moved with the precision of a seasoned swordsman. Realizing he and Alice were nowhere near capable of properly training him, Reynolds suggested hiring an instructor. Alice was against the idea of sending Arthur away, but Reynolds argued that they had no choice if Arthur was going to reach his potential. Listening to their back and forth, Arthur proposed a third option: moving into the city together so he could learn while staying with them. To his relief, they agreed to move to Zyrus City. For the journey, Reynolds and Alice hired their old party, the Twin Horns, as escorts. The team consisted of Helen, Angela, Adam, Durden, and Jasmine. As they set out, Arthur quickly noticed how primitive this world's transportation system was compared to his previous life. Their journey was soon interrupted by a pack of wolf-like monsters. Fortunately, the Twin Horns dispatched them with ease, giving Arthur a chance to carefully observe each member's fighting style. Later that night, he discovered that his mother, Alice, was actually a rare emitter mage capable of using healing magic, something he had not expected. Adam, the Twin Horn spearman, decided to test Arthur's skills. The duel ended quickly with Arthur losing, largely because his current body was still too small to fight as he used to. Jasmine, the party scout, however, noticed something unusual. Arthur had instinctively used ki in his legs to increase his speed. Curious, she asked him to share the technique. Arthur agreed. The journey continued smoothly, with Arthur learning much from the party members. Arthur's birthday arrived and Jasmine gifted him a knife also as a thanks for teaching her technique. But soon trouble struck when a group of bandits ambushed them, targeting Alice and the other women. Though Reynolds and the others fought valiantly, the bandits' sheer numbers began to overwhelm them. Arthur wanted to jump in, but Reynolds firmly ordered him to stay with Alice and protect her. That was when Arthur learned Alice was pregnant. When Arthur attempted to flee with Alice, a bandit mage attacked. The spell sent Arthur flying off a cliff. In that desperate moment, he shoved Alice to safety and clung to the mage with Jasmine's knife, dragging the man down with him. As the world blurred around him during the fall, Arthur understood for the first time why the emissary from his past life had thanked him. Knowing Alice and his unborn sibling would live, he felt a strange peace, even as he plummeted toward death. But death did not come. Arthur awoke deep in the forest at the bottom of the cliff, battered but alive. Standing before him was a terrible beast with an aura so powerful it seemed to make the forest itself tremble. And then to Arthur's shock, the monster greeted him by name. Arthur attacked with all the force his small body could muster, but the monster before him casually deflected the blow as if swatting away a fly. To Arthur's surprise, the creature introduced itself as Sylvia and claimed to be his ally. Instead of finishing him off, she offered him strange fruits that restored his strength, leaving Arthur more confused than ever. Desperate to know about his family, Arthur demanded answers. Sylvia revealed he had been unconscious for several days, during which his parents were forced to continue their journey without him. The realization left Arthur torn, relieved they were safe. Days stretched into weeks. Arthur longed to leave the forest, but it was crawling with monsters, and Sylvia herself was unable to leave her cave due to lingering injuries. She promised to send him back eventually, though it would take time to prepare. In the meantime, Arthur honed his swordsmanship and practiced magic relentlessly. One day, impressed by his persistence, Sylvia shows Arthur that it is possible to use magic while absorbing more from the environment at the same time, allowing spells to be cast indefinitely. Arthur's eyes lit up like a child shown candy, but before teaching him, Sylvia demanded to know his intentions. Without hesitation, Arthur admitted he sought revenge because that had always been the way he lived his past life. Sylvia's disappointment was immediate and crushing. She refused to teach him, explaining that as long as hatred poisoned his heart, his power would consume him. She reminded him that her hands could just as easily strangle as they could comfort, and she asked which one he preferred. He chose gentleness, and eventually, Arthur realized he could not repeat the blood-soaked cycle of his former life and swore to protect others. At last, Sylvia agreed to train him. Meanwhile, another monster identical to Sylvia searches for her. After much effort, Arthur learns Sylvia's ability. The second monster locates Sylvia. Sensing the danger, Sylvia hid Arthur away. It demanded she return, but Sylvia refused, leading to a violent clash. In that moment, she revealed her true form, a majestic white dragon. Just before the enemy's attack landed, Sylvia froze time itself. Turning to Arthur, she reminded him of his promise to protect others. She bestowed upon him a glowing mana crystal, one of her feathers, and a tattoo etched across his body that mirrored her own markings. Arthur, normally unshaken, felt the weight of her gifts and the inevitability of her sacrifice. For the first time, he addressed her in his heart as his adoptive grandmother. With a final farewell, Sylvia used the last of her magic to teleport him as close to his parents as she could, unfreezing time in the instant before unleashing an explosion that collapsed the cave. As Arthur was whisked through teleportation, despair gnawed at him. He could not protect Sylvia just as he had failed so many others before. Her final words echoed in his mind. This world is full of sadness, but he had the power to create one filled with happiness, as he was once the strongest king, revealing she knew about his past life. Arthur awakens alone in the forest and begins his journey to survive until he finds his parents. Almost immediately after his teleportation, Arthur hears someone screaming and rushes to investigate. He discovers slavers kidnapping a young elf girl. Following them quietly, he waits for the right moment to strike. The slavers are also keeping wild hounds, which Arthur cleverly uses to lure them into disarray. One by one, he ambushes and takes down 3 of the slavers, only to find their leader is a mage. After a grueling magical duel, Arthur manages to kill him. As he frees the elf girl for a brief moment, her face reminds him of someone he once knew, but he brushes off the thought. Determined to help, Arthur decides to send her back to her home in Elven. Unfortunately, she is far too young to travel alone, forcing him to escort her himself. To make things worse, Elven lies in the completely opposite direction from his own home, leaving him to grit his teeth and accept that his family reunion will have to wait. Arthur considers killing the slavers' wild hounds, but the girl insists on setting them free. It is then that she introduces herself as Tesha Aerolith, revealing her dream to train as a mage when she is older. When Arthur asks how she got captured, she explains, without a trace of embarrassment, that she had been chasing a butterfly in the woods, got lost, and stumbled into the slavers. Arthur soon realizes one of the slavers' wolves is following them, which keeps him constantly on guard. Tesha, however, seems more worried about ghosts than wolves and insists Arthur sleep inside the tent. She promises to keep his fear a secret, though Arthur is certain it's just her excuse not to sleep alone. The trip grows increasingly frustrating for Arthur, not only because it delays his search for his parents, but also because his mana core begins acting up. Painful episodes leave him barely able to move. During one such moment, Tesha goes to gather medicinal herbs while the wolf suddenly appears, dropping food before leaving again. Arthur is baffled, but Tesha insists it is the wolf's way of thanking them for sparing its life. As more days pass, Tesha grows closer to Arthur, asking if she can call him Arth, since they are now friends. Arthur, too tired to argue, casually agrees. Eventually, they reach a teleportation portal that Tesha recognizes as a gateway to Elenwar. Before Arthur can react, she grabs his hand and pulls him inside. The moment they arrive, Elven soldiers seize Arthur, while Tesha, now suddenly indifferent, watches without lifting a finger to help. Tesha doesn't seem to care as Arthur is dragged away, making him realize he had foolishly let his guard down by trusting her. However, she suddenly asks the soldiers to stop, but they plan to execute him. Unfortunately, they still plan to execute him, accusing Arthur of brainwashing her. Before they can strike, they are then stopped by Tesha's grandfather, Virion. To Arthur's shock, this means Tesha is actually a princess. Her parents, King Alduin and Queen Muriel, demand Arthur's arrest, but Virion calmly reminds them that he already stopped the soldiers. Tesha, far less calm, simply shouts at them until they reluctantly agree to be hospitable to Arthur in the castle. Tesha then drags and takes him to her home. On their way, Arthur quickly notices elves don't exactly roll out the red carpet for humans, thanks to a messy history of wars. He can't help but remain confused about why Tesha acted so hostile towards him when they first arrived. At the castle, Arthur resolves to explain himself to Tesha's parents. Tesha is present and insists he sit down for tea first. He introduces himself and explains how he was separated from his parents and rescued Tesha from slavers, though he carefully avoids mentioning Sylvia. When asked how he pulled off such a feat, Arthur admits he is a mage and fought the slavers himself. Naturally, the royals don't believe a child's magic could defeat hardened criminals, but Tesha confirms his story and insists Arthur saved her. Arthur requests to be returned to Sapin, though Alduin explains the only teleportation portal to Sapin won't open for another 5 years. After some persistence from Tesha, Alduin reluctantly agrees to have guards escort Arthur there on foot. Unfortunately, Arthur's recurring mana pain attacks worsen, leaving him shaken. He sees Tesha happily spending time with her parents and is reminded of his own family. Tesha then meets Arthur and apologizes for the soldiers and others' rude behavior towards him. Doubt creeps in and he begins to wonder if his parents would even want him back. Tesha quickly snaps him out of the spiral, reminding him he's being ridiculous. Just then an attacker lunges at Tesha. Arthur instinctively shields her, only to discover the culprit is Virion himself, testing him. Intrigued, Virion challenges Arthur to a duel to see how he supposedly defeated slavers. To his surprise, Arthur wins. Stubborn and perhaps slightly embarrassed, Virion immediately demands a rematch, until Tesha scolds him for bullying a child. Virion, impressed despite himself, offers to make Arthur his apprentice. Arthur hesitates, wanting to first let his parents know he is alive. Virion then reveals there may be a way to contact them. Before they can continue, Arthur suffers another painful mana attack. Virion examines him and discovers the cause. Arthur has unknowingly acquired the will of a beast. Without proper training, the power will eventually kill him. In his dreams, Arthur feels the agony of his mana core as though a shadowy monster is clawing at him. He wakes up, relieved, only to find Tesha shaking him awake and telling him to get ready. Virion is waiting. Tesha's parents argue that Arthur cannot stay in the castle, but Virion stubbornly insists he has taken a liking to the boy. To prove his point, Virion decides to take Arthur to visit an old friend. During the journey, Tesha dozes off, and Virion uses the quiet moment to warn Arthur. As the heir to the throne, Tesha has often been manipulated by those pretending to be her friend. If she trusts Arthur, Virion says, then Arthur must be someone special. Arthur, of course, tries not to look smug at the compliment. They soon arrive at their destination, where Virion knocks on the door of an old acquaintance. The door creaks open to reveal Rhynia Darkasson, an elven sorceress who introduces herself as a diviner, someone who can sense both the past and the future. Arthur explains he wants to contact his parents and Rhaenyra agrees. She leads him to a basin of water, telling him to focus on his parents and try speaking to them. Arthur peers into the water and sees Reynolds and Alice having dinner, though their joy is dimmed by sadness. It's Arthur's birthday and they still blame themselves for what happened. Afterward, they settle in Xyrus City but cannot shake their guilt. With Rhaenyra's help, Arthur manages to send a psychic message to them, assuring them he is alive, safe, and will join them in Xyrus once his illness is cured. His parents are overjoyed at the message, and Arthur feels the fire to reunite with them. Determined, he accepts Vyrion's offer to become his apprentice. Back at the castle, the king continues to oppose Arthur's stay, but Vyrion claims full responsibility, and Tesha sides firmly with Arthur. Reluctantly, the king apologizes and officially welcomes Arthur into the castle. Tesha wastes no time dragging Arthur off to show him around Elenoir. During their tour, they are interrupted by a group of children Tesha knows, including Ferith Ivsar, one of the fake friends Vyrion warned about. Ferith offers to accompany Tesha, but she pointedly chooses Arthur instead. Arthur, never missing the chance to poke fun, mocks Ferith, who immediately challenges him to a duel. Refusing would dishonor Vyrion, and since a crowd has already gathered, Arthur accepts. With one punch, he knocks Ferith unconscious, leaving the audience stunned and Tesha smugly satisfied. Afterward, Tesha and Arthur continue their tour, sharing a quiet moment of determination. Arthur promises himself to work hard, and Tesha vows to work just as hard to catch up to him. The next day, Arthur begins his beast tamer training under Vyrion, resolved to master everything the old elf can teach. 3 years later, Arthur and Tesha have grown up and become more powerful with their abilities. As Arthur and Tesha warmed up, Vyrion decided they were ready for the next step. He explained to Arthur that elves specialized in wind magic, while dwarves were particularly skilled in earth and fire. Humans, however, had the potential to use all 4 elements, though in reality, very few individuals ever managed it. Tesha, being exceptional even among elves, awakened her mana at an early age and naturally became Arthur's sparring partner. Vyrion also revealed a limitation. Arthur could not use sorcery, as the beast will inside him disrupted the balance between his body and his core. After 3 years of training, Vyrion judged it was time for Arthur to awaken that beast will. The process was anything but smooth. The surge of magic exploded violently, blasting both Vyrion and Tesha off their feet while Arthur promptly collapsed unconscious. When he finally woke, Vyrion asked what form his beast will had taken. Arthur, with no choice but to be honest, admitted it came from a dragon. Vyrion was surprised clearly. This was far beyond anything he expected. Vyrion then told Arthur that in 4 months he would be able to leave Elenoir. The Sapin portal, originally scheduled to open years later, was being activated early for a massive cultural exchange between elves, dwarves, and humans. Arthur learned Tesha already knew about it. Later that night, the thought of leaving in just 4 months left him feeling a little melancholy, and his mood took a surprising turn when the crystal Sylvia had entrusted to him suddenly hatched. Out popped a small black dragon, who immediately bit Arthur to form a telepathic bond and promptly declared him Dad. Amused and bewildered, Arthur named her Sylvie. The next morning, Tesha walked in to wake him, only to find Sylvie curled up beside him. She instantly adored the dragon. Then they visit Vyrion, when introduced, was equally shocked but quick to advise Arthur to call Sylvie a special mana beast. After all, nobody would believe a child raising a dragon, and even if they did, it would probably cause panic. Vyrion suspected the awakening of Arthur's beast will was what triggered Sylvie's hatching. Training continued, with Vyrion showing Arthur one of his more advanced spatial techniques. Arthur surrendered almost instantly against it, proving he had a long way to go. Not long after, Arthur ran into Ferith for the first time since their duel, though he barely remembered the boy's face. Arthur again beats him, and it transpires that Ferith actually wanted to be Arthur's friend. It's revealed that he too was joining the cultural exchange. Tesha, however, was not. Ferith teased her, claiming she was too delicate to join, and promptly earned himself another beating, this time from Tesha. Arthur then takes her away. Still, the exchange weighed on her. Tesha was saddened that other children, even Ferith, could go while she was forbidden due to her status as the princess. Calling Arthur an old man, she ran off in frustration. Later that night, Arthur found her, and the two spent some quiet time together in the woods until Tesha drifted off to sleep. Finally, the day came for Arthur's departure. Vyrion presented him with a compass marked with the Elenoir royal seal, granting him permission to return whenever he wished. Tesha nearly missed the chance to say goodbye, but managed to see him off with the promise that they would meet again. Arthur then traveled to Xyrus, the magnificent flying city resting on a floating island. Upon arriving at his parents' new home, the door opened to reveal a little girl come to welcome him. Reynolds and Alice were overjoyed to see Arthur again, and even more delighted when the little girl by their side was revealed to be Arthur's younger sister, Eleanor. After the family reunion had settled down, Arthur recounted the story of his absence, though carefully omitting Sylvia from the tale. Instead, he explained how he met Tesha and trained in Eleanor while recovering from what he described as an illness caused by his mana core awakening too early. Sylvie, he said, was a mana beast he had found along his journey, orphaned after her mother's death. Nobody needed to know about dragons, not yet. When Arthur asked what his father was doing these days, Reynolds proudly revealed he now worked security at a city auction house. Naturally, he was curious about his son's current strength, especially since Arthur's mana core was already at a light red stage, nearly equal to his own, despite Arthur being only 8 years old. Mana core power goes from darker to lighter colors, and Reynolds asks Arthur to duel. Just then the Halstia family paid a visit. Reynolds' boss Vincent, his wife Tabitha, and their daughter Lilia. Reynolds wasted no time and asked for permission to duel his son in front of their guests. The spar began casually with some fist exchanges, before Reynolds unleashed his fire magic. Arthur, unfazed, countered with advanced fire and even water magic, fighting him to a stalemate. The sight stunned everyone. After all, it was already rare for a child to wield magic at Arthur's level, but controlling multiple elements at his age was practically unheard of. Vincent, thoroughly impressed, remarked that Arthur's abilities easily surpassed those of 12-year-old students at the prestigious Xyrus Magic Academy. He even offered to personally cover Arthur's tuition and secure his admission despite his young age. Arthur, however, declined for the moment, explaining that he had only just reunited with his family after years apart. School could wait, family dinners couldn't. Afterwards, Arthur is approached by Lilia, who takes Arthur to the servants' quarters as her secret hideout. The servants themselves confessed that she often came to the servants' quarters when she felt stressed. They revealed that Lilia frequently worried about her future, burdened by her parents' high hopes that she would awaken a mana core and become a successful mage. Arthur, ever the quiet observer, noted the pressure hanging over her. The next morning brought a pleasant surprise. The twin horns paid a visit. Each member was glad to see him safe, especially Jasmine, who admitted she still regretted being unable to stop him from falling off that cliff. Reunited with his old protectors, Arthur couldn't help but feel a spark of curiosity about the adventurer's life. After all, adventuring promised more than just battles. It offered the chance to explore the other kingdoms, something Arthur knew he still had much to learn about in this strange, magical world. Arthur continued practicing Sylvie's time-freezing ability, though he could only manage to hold it for a few moments before it slipped away. Just then, Sylvie trotted up to him, messy and dirt-streaked. Shaking his head, Arthur gave her a proper cleaning, recalling what the servants had once told him about Lilia, how she often struggled with pressure and expectations. Not long after, his mother arrived along with Tabitha and Lilia to take him into the city. The first order of business was a haircut and new clothes, with Lilia eagerly choosing the styles for him. While shopping, Arthur sensed a faint presence coming from a store selling extracted beast cores. Curious, he asked about it, and Tabitha explained that a core's value depended on the mana beast it came from. Some were nearly worthless, others could cost a fortune. She promised they could arrange some through their auction house. Lilia, however, had long yearned for one. Though beast cores sometimes carried beast wills, her parents had always forbidden it, insisting she focus on awakening her own core instead of cheating. Later, while the group was having lunch, Lilia quietly slipped away to buy a cheap core from another store. Arthur noticed and followed her, trying to dissuade her in case it didn't work. Their argument, however, drew the attention of a few academy boys, and a fight nearly broke out. Before things could escalate, Tabitha arrived, and the boys quickly backed off once they realized Lilia was Vincent's daughter, the daughter of a major financial donor to their academy. Vincent later reassured Arthur that this incident would not affect his admission to Xyrus. But Lilia, feeling overlooked, grew upset. She believed her father was only sending Arthur as a replacement for her since she couldn't use magic. Overwhelmed, she ran away. Arthur eventually found her hiding in the servants' quarters. He had intended to apologize, but instead, it was Lilia who admitted her jealousy. She explained that ever since childhood, she had dreamed of becoming a great mage, but no matter how hard she tried, she had never been able to use magic. Now, with Arthur suddenly appearing full of talent, her parents' attention had shifted to him, leaving her feeling invisible. Arthur, remembering how Tesha had once cheered him up when he was at his lowest, tried to encourage her. When she calmed down, he asked if she truly wanted to use magic. Deciding to help, Arthur boldly claimed to have sent Lilia to Elenoir for training. At first, Vincent and Tabitha were furious, but soon realized how unfairly they had pressured their daughter. Lilia confessed she hadn't actually gone anywhere. She just wanted them to understand her feelings. Arthur apologized as well, admitting he knew how painful it felt to be separated from one's parents. Moved, Vincent apologized to Reynolds and Alice for even suggesting sending Arthur away right after his reunion with them. He also apologized and promised to support Lilia no matter what future she chose for herself. With a newfound determination, Lilia declared her decision to attend Xyrus Academy. To support her, Arthur secretly used Virion's technique to forcibly awaken her dormant core, and even did the same for little Eleanor. Their success called for celebration, and Vincent threw a grand party in their honor. Meanwhile, a sinister man takes an interest in Vincent's auction house. Arthur and the others arrived at the auction house, and Arthur was surprised by how large it was. Reynolds and his adventurer friends were responsible for maintaining the security of the place. Vincent hosted an auction attended by King Blaine and his family. During the event, Sylvia went missing and was later found by a strange man. Arthur went to look for her while the king purchased a world lion cub for his son, Prince Curtis, as his mana beast partner. Arthur found Sylvia, but she was being held by the strange man, Sebastian, the king's magician, who selfishly demanded that Arthur give Sylvia to him as a partner. When Arthur refused, Sebastian attempted to scare him by firing a spell, but Arthur ignored it. However, when Sebastian threatened his family, Arthur's anger flared, and his bloodlust caused damage throughout the building. Realizing he had lost control, Arthur calmed himself, but Blaine, unaware it was him, assumed it was the work of a magical assassin and punished Reynolds for failing in his duty. Sebastian suggested that surrendering Sylvia would be a suitable punishment, and Blaine agreed, instructing Reynolds to hand her over. Reynolds, however, left the decision to Arthur. The king then offered to exchange Sylvia for the world lion cub, but Arthur refused again. Finally, Arthur stood up to Blaine directly, asking him the price he would take to sell his own children. Enraged, the king's knights seized Arthur, but he defeated them. Sebastian also attacked, but Arthur froze time, leaving only Sebastian unaffected. After breaking his leg and terrifying him with the image of his beast core, which took the shape of Sylvia, Arthur finally collapsed unconscious. The next day when Arthur woke, Alice told him that everyone had been worried. She then took him shopping where she bought a hair clip for Eleanor and asked Arthur to give it to her. Arthur worried about the prince, thinking Reynolds might have lost his job, but Alice assured him that she also had a job of her own. When they returned home, they saw Reynolds speaking to someone, and it was revealed that Blaine had sent a messenger to apologize. The king explained that the knights had been dismissed, as had Sebastian, who had been rambling nonsense about Arthur breaking his leg despite being across the room. Blaine also sent gold as compensation, though it was implied that refusing it could bring consequences. Reynolds accepted the apology and gave the gold to Arthur for his future. Arthur, however, was displeased with how things ended. Realizing he was still a child in this world, he resolved to attend the academy and learn how to grow stronger with Sylvia as his partner. Upon arriving at the academy, he noticed an owl and followed it to a certain place, where he encountered a mysterious woman. The Magic Academy was a prestigious institute where students learned and trained in magic before joining different fields. They could become mages, royal knights, entrepreneurs, and many more. In front of Arthur stood none other than Director Goodsky of the academy. She dueled Arthur, and though he could tell she was powerful, he tried using different elements to attack her. None of them worked, as she easily defended his assaults and defeated him, but she sensed his potential. Arthur passed her test by surviving her sound attack. Arthur agreed to learn from her if she extended protection to his family. He also deferred his enrollment until he was the appropriate age, planning to spend 3 years as an adventurer first. She asked if he had already told his parents, but he decided he would after this. She told him their deal would stand once they accepted. Arthur later told his parents, but Alice disagreed, saying she could not send him into danger again. Arthur insisted that he wanted to know more about the world and experience adventuring life like Alice and Reynolds had. Alice finally agreed as long as he came home every few months, while Reynolds insisted that he have an experienced adventurer supporting him. He then called his friends and asked them to take Arthur in, which Jasmine volunteered for. Arthur went to buy a sword from Vincent, but after checking several, he was disappointed by the options. Sylvia located a heavy iron staff that turned out to be a sword, one that could only be drawn when infused with magic. The sword, inscribed with Dawn's Ballad W.K4, magically shrank until it was the perfect size for Arthur's hand. Reynolds and Vincent arrived, believing the weapon to be a magic artifact, but Arthur purchased a much cheaper sword for appearance's sake. Vincent noticed the staff, and his assistant explained that someone had thrown it away as useless. Since Arthur requested it and even called Vincent uncle, Vincent allowed him to keep it, believing it was nothing more than a cheap iron staff. Thus, Arthur received the magic sword for free as a disposable practice weapon. Arthur then spent his remaining days with his family. Weeks later, on his 9th birthday, after dinner and celebration, he received gifts from his loved ones. Alice gave him a healing magic glove, Vincent gave him a ring that would alert Alice if Arthur were in mortal danger, and the twin horns gifted him a single-use scroll for sending an emergency message. With his preparations complete, Arthur felt happy to have friends and family in this life and vowed to fight for them. That was why he swore to become stronger than he had been in his previous life, to protect the people he loved. Finally, he said goodbye to his parents and departed with Jasmine. Jasmine took Arthur to the Adventurers Guild to obtain a license. Arthur wore a mask to hide himself from the royal family. There, they met Guildmaster Caspian Bladeheart, who explained that since Jasmine recommended Arthur, there was no need for him to take the writ. Caspian also informed Jasmine that her father had been looking for her. Arthur chose to register under the alias Note. They then proceeded to the exam hall, where the examiner dueled candidates and assigned ranks according to their abilities. During the exam, a candidate named Elijah Knight was granted a B rank without having to take the test. Arthur also witnessed an arrogant young half-elf named Lucas, whose mana core was at the light orange stage. Lucas excelled in fire magic and performed a high-level fire spell, but lost control midway, forcing the examiner to defend against it. Lucas then attempted a cowardly sneak attack, which Arthur prevented, leading the examiner to grant him only a B rank. When Arthur's turn came, the others noticed a dark aura surrounding him. Caspian personally oversaw his exam and deemed him worthy of B rank. Guild officials grew suspicious since many children were registering and attaining B rank so quickly. Caspian, however, was unsurprised, noting that the recent cultural exchange had caused guilds to lift the ban on elves and dwarves. Lucas' background was also revealed. His mother had been an elf slave, while his father, Lord Wykes, desired a sorcerer's son. Meanwhile, Elijah was a human raised by dwarf parents. The guild still regarded Arthur as a mystery, though they assumed he was backed by the Flamesworth family, who were famous for fire magic. Yet the guild chief was more impressed with Arthur's swordsmanship, claiming he would become unmatched as he grew older. Arthur, however, was still dwelling on his duel with the guild chief. Later, Arthur bumped into Elijah Knight, who remarked that if Arthur had not interfered in Lucas' match, he would have done so himself. Lucas also appeared, trying to threaten Arthur, but left as everyone looked at them. Jasmine took Arthur to train in a low-danger area. On the way, Arthur realized Jasmine was much faster than he expected, making him realize he had underestimated both the guild chief and Jasmine in the same day. During training, they encountered a rampaging boar monster that escaped from a cage. While fighting it, Jasmine lost her balance but was saved by Arthur. The monster then turned to attack another adventurer, and Jasmine rushed to protect them. Arthur's past self seemed to whisper to him to be patient and wait for the right moment, which he did, allowing him to slay the boar successfully. Later, Jasmine revealed that she became an adventurer to escape her family, the Flamesworths. Though she awakened her mana early, she was rejected when it was discovered she did not possess the family's trademark fire magic. Arthur told her that there was no hierarchy in elements, as it depended on how the user wielded them. Jasmine admitted she was often scolded by twin horns for fighting alone, just like Arthur, but they taught her to rely on others. That night, as Jasmine slept, Arthur wondered if he could truly change in this life. Meanwhile, Tesha watched Arthur through a crystal ball and grew upset at seeing him with another woman. Virion then appeared, advising her to focus on herself and handing her a book. In the end, 2 years later, Arthur has become famous as Note the Masked Swordsman.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this. If you have any suggestions or questions, feel free to leave a comment below. Until next time, take care.